Good afternoon all. So welcome to another EdTech webinar. This time we've got a geography focus and we're joined by Hannah Edgeworth, who will be talking us through how we can create geography field trips in a virtual environment. And lots of technical information here and an awareness that some of this stuff is going to want to be revisited by some of you that are attending today. So just to kind of give you a reminder, all of our EdTech webinars are recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel shortly after each of the sessions is completed. Now, I want to bring Hannah in and introduce her live to the stage. Hannah, you there? There we go.
Hello, James. Thank you.
That's all right. So this is Hannah. She's going to be fielding our questions as we go today. So we've got a sort of 20-minute recording talking us through, obviously, how to use Google Earth Pro, and I'll let Hannah sort of go through that in her recording. But to kind of give you a few sort of bits and pieces with housekeeping of the recording, you'll notice at the bottom of your screens, you've got a range of sort of options. About here, there's a tab that says Q&A, and that's a chance for you to ask Hannah a series of questions as we go through today. So as we go through the recording, feel free to type in questions. Hannah will pick those questions and answer them as we go. And obviously time at the end to allow for some live questions as well. So without much further hold up, we'll jump straight into the recording and we'll go from there.
All about how to carry out virtual geography fieldwork. In today's session, I'm going to be showing you lots of different tips and tools that you can use using Google Earth Pro to carry out geography fieldwork. This can be applied to both Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 geography, and it can be made specific to the exam specification that you are studying with your students. My name's Hannah Edgeworth, and I'm a geography teacher and I'm head of Year 10 at Denby High School in Luton. Most of the skills that I've picked up have been skills that I've learned throughout my geography degree, and I've adapted these and applied these to my geography teaching, especially during the times of COVID, so that students can carry out virtual fieldwork when we are no longer allowed to take them into the field itself. However, these tools are really useful even when we can take students into the field, as it allows them to prepare for the new changes that are taking place in terms of geographical information systems, and it allows them to discover new landscapes and new environments that we otherwise would not be able to take them to across the world. So the aims of today's session, we're going to first of all have a look at how we can collect primary data using Google Earth. We're going to look at how we can create maps using Google Earth and the creation of these maps both for students and for staff to use these within lessons. We're going to look at the use of the historical imagery tool on Google Earth. We're going to look at how we can record a tour, and then finally look at the uses of layers within Google Earth. So the first skill we're going to have a look at is how we can actually collect primary data using Google Earth. I'm going to show you 3 different tools that you can use to effectively collect data with your students. The first one we're going to look at is the ruler tool. So the first piece of primary data collection that we're going to look at is the use of the ruler tool. This is really useful because it is quick and easy, and you can get your students to collect a large amount of data in a really short period of time. This can be applied to all different types of fieldwork. I'm going to use this example here on a river environment. So you select the ruler tool at the top of the screen where it says show ruler. Your students can then measure sections across a river cross profile, and it will give you the information in whatever measurement you like. So here we've got meters, you can change it to kilometers, centimeters, inches, feet, whatever is the most appropriate for your data collection. So this way you can get your students to write the information down in the table and collect lots of information nice and quickly. So now that you know how to actually use the ruler tool, I'm going to show you some suggested uses of this. So some of the ways that I use it in my lessons is to measure river width. You might want to measure beach width. You can look at distance between locations. You can measure the size of an urban development in the past and now. Students can record all of this data in a table, whether that be on a Word document or in an Excel spreadsheet, just as they would if they were actually in the field collecting this data. We're now going to look at our second piece of primary data collection, which is drawing a path on Google Earth. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is how to use the path tool. This will allow you to measure distance and also measure gradient change. I'm going to show you this on an example of a river. However, this can be used to measure transects. It can be used to measure beach width, any information that you would like to collect can be used throughout this path tool. So you just select the path tool up here at the top of the screen, which will say add path. Make sure you give your path an appropriate name so that when you save it, you can come back and find it again. So we're going to be repeating this as well, so you might want to number it number 1 and then say river gradient. I'm not going to do that now, but I would suggest doing that. The next thing you need to do is select a colour for your line. I'm going to select green here for our gradient. This will be useful when you come to create a key later on. You then need to select the gradient section that you want to measure. I'm just going to do this as an individual line. But if you want to, you can follow a whole section of a river, you can follow the meander round, you can follow as much as you want, and it will still give you the gradient profile. But I'm going to just make this simple for now, just by creating one line. Once you're happy with your gradient, then you select OK. And you will see it gets added to your places on the left-hand side of your screen. If you then want to find out the data for your line that you have just created, you then select Show Elevation Profile. So you need to right-click your information, then select Show Elevation Profile. It will then show you your gradient for the section that you have just looked at. So you can see that here. You can get students to either print screen this so that they've got this information as a graph, or you can get them to just write down the information. So it will tell you the total distance of your line. So you can see here our total distance is 446 metres. It will then tell you your elevation gain and your elevation loss. So you've got here that it has decreased by minus 2.6 metres. You've also got your gradient and your average slope here. So we've got all of this information that you can get your students to write down and collect data depending on what your fieldwork requires. Once this is done, you can also get your students to repeat this and add multiple gradients onto the same piece of information. So I'm just going to add the ones that I created earlier. Then you can get your students to fill out this information in a table so you've got an average to make your students' data collection more reliable for their exam specification or the fieldwork that they might be collecting. Drawing a path is a really useful tool as it allows you to collect more information than just the ruler. Drawing a path allows you to get the gradient in your information, and it also allows you to save your different drawings that you've created. You can add more than one point, whereas a ruler is just from one place to another. Paths can be used more than once. This is useful as you can look at river gradients, you can look at catchment gradients, and you can also draw transects for data collection. The final piece of primary data collection we're going to look at is how we can draw polygons to measure area and to create maps. And this is the use of the polygon tool. So the polygon is the second one along on the toolbar where it says add polygon. This will allow you to measure both area and allow you to change the colour. I like to use this for land use within a region. So just as before, make sure that you give your polygon an appropriate name. So for example, this could be residential land use. Then what you will want to do is you'll want to select an area or a region which is all residential land use. So I can see this region here. You then click with your left button just the area, and then you can drag it around the outline of the land use that you want to look at, as you can see. It's nice and quick. You can spend as much time as you want drawing around the outline, but I'm just doing it nice and quickly just to show you the basic outline here. Once you're happy with your polygon, you can then select the information on here. So just as before, you can change the colour. But this time it's really important that you make sure your different land uses are different colours, as it will allow you to create a graph with a key to show your different land uses in your regions. So for example, I might decide that residential land use is going to be coloured blue. I will then select OK for the blue, for the line, but also the area. Once you have done that, the next bit is really important as well. You need to make sure that you have it opaque up to 50%. This will mean that you can see the land use underneath. If it's at the default of 100%, you can't see the Google Earth map below. Whereas if you change it to 50%, you can see the land use below, and you can also see your section on the polygon. Then, once you're happy with your first piece of information, you can then add another polygon for, say, a different land use. So this time it could be agriculture, and you might draw around your new region. Once you've done that, I'm going to quickly show you what it looks like when you add all of your different zones onto your map. So you can see here that I've started to go through all of my urban land use is in purple and all of my agricultural land use is in green. So you can build this up with as many different land uses as you like. In urban areas you might do commercial, industrial and so on. So this can be applied to your rivers fieldwork for land use surrounding your river looking at flood risk, or it can be used on your urban fieldwork as well. Polygons are really useful because you can use them on both urban and rural fieldwork. On the urban fieldwork, you can use them to show your different land uses. You can use this as choropleth maps, you can add data, you can add overlays. So have a little play around and look at the many different uses you can have for this. You can also think about how this might link to flood risk, as you can see on this map on the right, looking at your land use and your change. So that was the end of our primary data collection. We're now going to have a look at how we can actually create a map on Google Earth and display any of the primary data that we have collected using our Google Earth map, and also how we can create Google Earth maps to make them useful both within the classroom, in lessons, and get your students to create them for fieldwork. This can be created through the mapping tool at the top of the screen. It's a picture of the map here that says Save Image. What you can then do, you can select the area that you would like your map to contain. So I'm going to use this area here. It will give your map a scale, which you can move and put in the position that you would like. It also creates a north arrow, which you can also move to the location that you desire. It creates a legend, which will be your key and information that we'll add in later, and a map title and description. What you can then do, you can choose which information you want to be included on your map. So here I've added my widths, my cross sections for my map. I can add my gradient in. I can also add in my different land uses on my map. Once you've selected the different layers and the different information that you would like your map to contain, you can then update your legend with the information that you would like to be included in your area. So if you select the legend button, it will then select Refresh from View. This will then add in all the information that you have included onto your map. You can then edit what each of these are called. So you might want to change where it says agriculture to land use, and then the type of land use, agriculture here. Here, where it says middle course 1 cross profile, you might write river width, and then your river gradient for your final one. You can also remove sections, so there might be an area that's been added that you don't necessarily want to have on your legend, so you can deselect them from your map's view. Once you are happy with the information in your key, you can then X out of this box and it will be added to your map. You then need to give your map a title, so you might choose to have land use map, or whatever you want this to be called, and then a description about what your map is showing. Once you are happy with the information that is stored on your map, as I said, you can add as little or as much as you would like. You then select Save Image, and it will save your image, and you can then add this to your files to save your map, which can be imported to other documents and shared with your students. I think this is useful for students to create, but it's also a really useful tool to have for the classroom because you can add any layers, any information that you want to your map. As you can see, creating a map on Google Earth is really, really useful, and it allows you to experiment, to add data, to add information anywhere across the world. So if ever you need to use any maps in your lesson and there isn't one available online, you can easily create your own map with the information and the data that you need. The next really useful tool that we're going to look at is how we can use historical imagery to show how a landscape has changed. We can look at how physical landscapes have changed, we can look at how humans have carried out regeneration, or how urbanisation has affected a landscape. Historical imagery will allow you to compare an area from the past to now. So, however, Be careful to note that some regions have more historical imagery available than others, so make it easier to compare these environments. So make sure you check these carefully before you use this tool. So the way you access the historical imagery is along the toolbar, there is a picture of a clock with an arrow going backwards. Once selected, this will show you your region, and it will show you all of the different historical maps that are available for this zone. So we're going to look at this region here around Tewkesbury. This will allow us to look at how the land use has changed and could think about flood risk and how this might have increased. So here we can see that we can go back to 1945. So we can see what Tewkesbury looked like in 1945, and then we can move this forward to 2020. So you can see your urban growth along this river. This will allow students to make these comparisons. This can be used in urban environments when you're looking at regeneration and changes also. It can also be used along coastlines to look at coastal erosion. So now that you know how to create your historical imagery, there's loads of different uses that you can use this for. The first one, you can think about how land use has changed. You can look at things like regeneration, urbanisation. You can even look at your physical changes that have taken place for your processes, such as coastal erosion or meander migration. The opportunities are limitless with this. The only thing that might affect your ability to use these maps is whether the historical maps are available and the quality of these maps for the areas you're looking at. So you can see here how we can look at urban land use change along a river, linking this into flooding. I've also got another example, so you can see London Docklands, regeneration, and how this area has changed. So if you use your creation of your map tool here, you can also add your keys and your description to help your user understand what it is that your map is showing. We're now going to have a look at layers on Google Earth. Layers are probably some of the simplest to use tools. However, they're really effective as they allow you to put pre-collected secondary data on top of your map. This allows your students and yourself to interpret and understand the environment more clearly that you are looking at. Google Earth has lots of different layers that are already built into it. All of these different layers will allow you to be able to explore and find out different pieces of information that your students can use both inside the classroom and at home for their remote learning. The layers are found on this section at the side. So the places is where all of your saved and added information is, and layers are the information that are provided by Google. You can turn on or off any of these layers. You can select multiple layers at a time, or you can choose to just have one layer on your map. This will allow you to be able to use this for place names, map creation, and explanations in your students' work. The ones I think are really useful here is the 3D building tool. This will allow your students to be able to see the landscape from a 3D point of view. If you zoom into your map, your students will be able to see 3D imagery within cities. This will allow them to see how the land use changes from the inner city to the outer city. The other pieces that is important here is if you select the terrain button. This will also add in the 3D landscape of surrounding natural features. So it will look at the vegetation and also the smaller buildings in your environment. So when these are both used together, your students can see how land use density, building height changes between your city location. So those are some of Google's inbuilt layers. They're really simple, really easy to use. And the best way to explore which ones you feel are going to be useful to you or what you can get your students to use in lessons is just to have a play around. Turn layers on and off and see what works for you. As well as the standard layers that are built into Google Earth, there are also additional layers that you can download from online. Loads and loads of different websites have these available free of charge. The notable ones that I tend to use with my students is the geology one. So you can select a geology map of the UK. This is useful for your UK environment, your physical landscape, so students can see how the geology of your landscape might change across the UK. These have built-in features where when you select the geology or the rock type, it will have a pop-up that comes out with the type of rock that are found in that region. So it gives them additional and extra information with links. There's loads and loads of different ones of these available. You've got plate boundaries that can be added to your map. So you can see how your plate boundaries change across the world if you're teaching a tectonics topic. There's also ones to do with biomes and climate. So you can look at your different biomes across the world and you can see how these have changed. You can look at climate change. So there's loads and loads of different features that you can add to your Google Earth. The best way to do this is just to go online and explore. Think about what you might want to add to your Google Earth. All you need to do is download the file from the internet, and then it will add straight into your Google Earth when you open it up. The final skill that we're going to look at is how your students can pull all this information together and create their own tour. This will allow them to record audio over any data, any information that they've collected, any of the layers that they've added on, and explain what they've created and what they can see in their work. This is really useful as students can add any of their layers, they can add any of the data, the primary data, anything that they have done on Google Earth, and they can talk over this and explain what it is that they've done. This can also be used to collect data and to create new kind of case study and new understanding about an area. So the way students do this, you first of all select the recording button at the top here of the tools. So it looks like a little camcorder. Once you select that, a little box will open up on your screen, and it will give you the option to just record, which will record just the imagery as to what can be seen on their screen, or audio, which will also record the audio that goes with this. So if you select record, it will then start recording the Google Earth imagery on the screen. Students can move around an environment. They might want to talk about land use within the region. They can hover over different sections. They can talk about building density. They can talk about any changes that take place. This could also be used when you're talking about site selection. It can be used to justify anything for the students. Once they're done, they then hit the record button again, and it will save the video that they've created, which will look like this. The students can then choose to save this tour. So if they select the save button here, it will save it in the places section, just like all the other data and information within Google Earth. So they might choose to call this Tour 1, Land Use, London. It will then save for them in the area over here in places. So you hit OK, and then your tour will be saved. The students can then play this, and you can view the imagery of the region that you have just looked at. Recording a tour on Google Earth is really useful as it allows you to be able to show all of the data and all of the information in one area. This means that you can either create a video of a new case study or a new environment for your students to be able to interact with, or you can get your students to create their own pieces of homework or their own pieces of work displaying all of the data and information that they have created in their Google Earth project. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Hopefully you've got loads of hints, loads of ideas, loads of tips about how you can embed Google Earth into your geography teaching. One of the best ways to explore Google Earth is just to get on there, to have a go. Try using some of these tools that we have looked at today and try exploring how you can embed these into your lessons, how you can develop them further. I've just touched on a few of the tools and a few of the ideas that you can use this for in your lessons. But really, Google Earth is limitless. There's so many different features, there's so many different add-ons, there's so much information that you can use out there. So have a go, play around with it, see what works, see what doesn't work for the students in your classes. So what we're going to do now, we're going to answer some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to support you and I'll be able to help you to embed this into your teaching. So if you've got any questions, please comment them below and we'll be able to go through those and hopefully support you in becoming more confident and implementing this into your teaching. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Hannah. So a really, really comprehensive video, and as I mentioned, obviously there's lots of technical aspects to that, and therefore it's quite likely that we're going to want to revisit this over sort of more time as well. So I think it's worthwhile commenting that this is going to be recorded, as I mentioned earlier, and added to our YouTube channel as well. So there are a couple of sort of questions coming through. If you want to add your questions, feel free to do so. We've got the Q&A down the bottom. Pop your question there, and Hannah will sort of get back to you with an answer. So we've got a couple of questions popping already. So Emma's asked, as well as Miss Lawson's asked, around Google Earth Pro. Is it free for students?
Yeah, Google Earth Free is completely free for anybody to download to their computer. It can be downloaded as a desktop app, so you can download it onto any device. Within our school, we've got Chromebooks, so we can download the actual app onto the students' Chromebook, so they can use it in class, they can use it in lessons to interact, as well as at home.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's really sort of worthwhile noting, because it kind of ties in with your sort of comments you were making during the video around homework, and obviously if students can access that in a free environment, it's obviously going to help a lot with that as well. Just picking up another question then, so Emma Johns asked, and I know this is something that we're probably all sort of curious to know, is in a situation where you've got, for example, 30 students accessing it on their computers at the same time, does it have any issues in terms of the way that it works online, or is it a case that there's not really sort of any IT issues that exist?
No, so as long as the software is downloaded onto the student's computer, and obviously your school's got a kind of a strong internet connection, then it should be fine, just the same as using any other kind of online tool or any other online software within your school.
So the maps are downloaded as the students are using it in that respect. So it's not an offline application.
So it's an online, just like if you were accessing Google Maps under satellite view on the desktop. Or on the internet, it's exactly the same. However, it's just run through a kind of a piece of software instead. Perfect,
thank you. Emma Darcy this time. So a quick question, it was something I was thinking as well. So going through that program, there's an awful lot, as you mentioned, and there's more to the program in itself. And how was it that you sort of picked it up? So I know that you said obviously that it was stuff that you picked up at university, but how is it that other teachers could pick up those skills? But I think equally students as well, if we're going to be expecting them to use it.
Yeah, so I first kind of discovered using Google Earth really when I was at university. We did quite a lot of actual assignments and university level projects using Google Earth. Some of the path tools we kind of obviously used at a much more advanced level, looking at kind of geomorphology, and we did quite a lot of work in the deserts in locations that we couldn't visit actually on our uni trips. So what I decided when I got back into the classroom, I wanted to be able to kind of scale this down so that students could have access to this work and they could explore those landscapes that we might not be able to take them to from kind of a school point of view. So the schools, the kind of the tools you can simplify down, such as the ruler tool, the path tool on a basic level, but then this can be advanced up and you can look at kind of incorporating all of the tools together to really analyze environments. So it can be applied kind of all the way down to Key Stage 1 if you wanted to look kind of simply at how a river gets wider, or it could be kind of scaled up, as I said, to kind of university level across all levels.
Perfect, brilliant. So I think that's kind of crucial in terms of the fit for purpose for sort of all phases of education as well. I think that's a good point. Another question's coming through. So again, if you want to ask questions, again, just the Q&A tab at the bottom. So A Crabtree's just asked, with the saved videos, can a student save the video and email it or submit it online? So can they sort of move it outside or export it from Google Earth Pro?
Yeah, so all of the data, everything that is on Google Earth Pro can be saved into your documents. So if you right click on any of the paths, if you right click on any of the Google tours, anything that you are creating or your students are creating, you just right click and then you click save. It will then save it as a normal document file. It will either be something called a KMZ or a KML file. And then just the same as before, if you open up Google Earth Pro, as you would with a normal document, and then just double click on your documents and open it up, and it will share it that way. So for example, you could, if you wanted to kind of set a fieldwork for your students, so you could have all of the measurements in place, you could have all the sites already mapped out for them, then all you need to do is send them the document, the KML file or the KMZ file, and they'll be able to open it straight away into their Google Earth. Brilliant,
thank you. I think that kind of almost leads quite nicely onto the next question, which was from Jess Newell in respect to sharing the map. So how do the pupils access the map? So is there a way that you can create a map that might also kind of almost act as a sort of start point for them? Is there a link or something that you can share with the students, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's just the normal document file. So you just save it as a regular document as you would if it was, say, a Word document. You just right click, select save, and it will save it into your documents. And then you can either email the file to your students, or you can put it on, say, a Google Classroom, and they'll be able to open it up. And when it's opened up, it will straight away open up into their Google Earth, and they'll be able to see it exactly the same as you can on your Google Earth.
Excellent. I think that's a really sort of key point. I think if we think about adapting for our students' needs, and it might be then that we can obviously provide some form of differentiated resource where there's almost a greater level of support there for students of different abilities. So just before we wrap up, there's one final question we'll come to, Kay's question, but just to remind people, this will be has been recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube page in the next week or so, and that will come out via Twitter. I'm sure Hannah will be able to retweet that as well, so obviously you'll be able to pick that up. So Kay, we'll come to your question then. So can the students manipulate a shared map?
Yeah, so if they open up the file that you've sent them, they can then add on their own data. So you might have just sent them the sites, for example, say you're carrying out some field work in a set location. You might say to them, here's site 1, site 2, and site 3. The student can then add their own data onto that map. So they can add their own data collection. They might want to draw a path. They might want to add their own polygons on, and then they can save that again and send it back to you as a teacher, or they can just fill it out on a Word document, depending on how you want them to use that.
Thank you for your time today. If you have any further questions, as I say, feel free to contact us on Twitter, and we'll go from there. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Bye.